My name is Jacqueline, 32 years old. I hadn't even taken my coat off when my mom said it, standing near the tree with a wine spritzer in her hand, barely looking at me, her eyes fixed on my daughter like she was something foreign, like the small bundle on my hip didn't belong in her house. "Why did you come to Christmas?" she asked, not with surprise, not with warmth, but with the sharp impatience of someone who believes they have the right to question your presence. My 9-month-old baby had just woken up from the drive, cheeks flushed from the cold, her tiny hand clutching the edge of my scarf, not crying, not fussing, just quiet and curious, trying to make sense of the lights and the smells and the unfamiliar voices, but none of that mattered to my mom. "Your 9-month-old baby makes people uncomfortable," she added, like she was stating a fact everyone else had already agreed to. I stared at her, standing there with my winter coat damp from melted snow, my back aching from the long drive, my body still not fully recovered from mastitis the week before, and the exhaustion of new motherhood sitting behind my eyes like a weight I couldn't put down. I hadn't come expecting much, just a normal Christmas, just a few hours where someone might look at my daughter and smile and say her name, but even that was apparently too much. My dad hadn't even looked up from whatever football game was on, and when he smirked, it was like a punchline had landed. "She's right," he said, voice casual, amused. "Sit this one out." In that moment, it wasn't just the words. It was how easy it was for them to say them, how practiced they sounded, like they'd been waiting for the chance to remind me where I ranked. I stood there holding my baby with one arm and a giant reusable shopping bag full of carefully wrapped gifts in the other. I'd spent 3 days picking them out, imagining my nephews' faces, choosing colors and sizes, folding tissue paper carefully, the way I always did, like effort could substitute for belonging. No one offered to take the bag. No one asked how we were. My sister Jenny walked in from the kitchen already on her second mimosa and looked at me like I'd tracked in something foul. One of her kids was sitting on the floor playing with a new iPad, probably from me, if last year was any pattern. Jenny didn't say hi either. She just flicked her eyes over my baby and then back to my face like she was daring me to make a scene. I shifted my daughter higher on my hip, feeling her warm breath against my neck, and I realized something I didn't want to realize. They weren't uncomfortable with my baby. They were uncomfortable with me not being convenient. A baby meant I couldn't just show up and absorb their insults quietly. A baby meant I had limits. A baby meant I had something more important than them, and they hated that. So I told them calmly, "If I'm not welcome, that's fine, but you all need to know this is the last time I do this." My mom blinked like she didn't understand the language I was speaking. Jenny scoffed under her breath. My dad chuckled like I was being dramatic. I looked straight at all of them and said it without emotion, because emotion was what they expected from me, and they had used it against me for years. "If you don't want me or my daughter here, then I will stop financing your lifestyle." It shut them up for a second. Just a second. Then the laughter started, but it wasn't the kind that lightens the room. It was mocking, satisfied, like they were watching a child threaten to run away. My dad actually clapped once. Jenny leaned against the kitchen doorway and said something about postpartum hormones, like my boundary was a symptom. My mom muttered something about me always needing attention, like I'd driven 2 hours through snow with a baby for attention. They said the words in the same tone they'd always used when they wanted me to shrink back into my role. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just said it again, slower this time, so there could be no confusion. "You will not receive another dollar from me." Then I listed it, not as a threat, but as a reality, like I was reading off a contract I'd finally decided to terminate. No more mortgage help, no more school tuition, no more emergency cash transfers, no more groceries, ballet classes, braces, car notes, rent insurance. My daughter shifted against me, and I kissed her forehead instinctively, because the room had turned cold in a way that had nothing to do with weather. "You've all lived off me like parasites for years, while making me feel like I'm the burden." I walked into the living room, set the bag of wrapped presents on the floor next to the fireplace, and for a second I almost laughed at myself for how symbolic it felt, like I was placing down a part of my old life with it. I picked up my diaper bag, turned around, and headed for the door. Jenny followed me, her voice sharper now that she realized I wasn't negotiating. "You're seriously leaving," she said. You're going to ruin Christmas for everyone over a baby tantrum that hasn't even happened yet." I didn't answer. I didn't give her words to twist. Outside, snow started falling again, heavy, thick flakes that blurred the windshield by the time I buckled my daughter into her car seat. The roads were getting worse by the minute, but I wasn't staying. I'd rather slide into a ditch than sit through another hour in that house pretending the way they treated me was normal. The drive home was silent. My daughter dozed off quickly, her pacifier bobbing with each breath, the glow from the dashboard making her face look impossibly soft. I glanced at her every few minutes, not because I was afraid she'd wake up, but because looking at her reminded me why I didn't cry. I didn't cry because somewhere deep down, a part of me had expected it to go this way. When we finally pulled into my driveway, it was close to midnight. Snow had piled up in ridges across the walkway. I carried her inside, kissed her forehead, and laid her down gently in the bassinet. Then I sat on the edge of my bed, still wearing my sweater, still feeling the ache in my back, staring at the empty space where the bag of gifts should have been. I realized I hadn't even labeled the presents with names. I had memorized each one, who it was for, what I'd thought when I bought it, as if knowing them by heart meant I belonged. I thought maybe they'd open them and feel something. But deep down I knew they wouldn't. No one had said my daughter's name the whole night, not once. And for the first time in my life, I didn't want them to. Later, after I fed her and watched her fall asleep with her little fingers curled around mine, I leaned close and whispered the promise I didn't know I'd been carrying for years. "You're never going to grow up thinking that kind of love is normal," I told her softly. "I promise you that." The morning after Christmas, I woke up to silence so complete it felt staged, like my family was waiting to see how long I could sit with it before I cracked. No text from my mom, no missed calls from Jenny, nothing from my dad, not even a lazy emoji or a blurry photo of the twins holding up their presents. You'd think I hadn't spent 3 days picking out those gifts with care, or driven 2 hours through a snowstorm just to be told I wasn't welcome. I sat in my kitchen with lukewarm coffee, watching my daughter smack her mashed banana across the high chair tray, and realized I'd done something irreversible. Not just by walking out, but by saying the quiet truth out loud about the money, about how they'd been leeching off me for years while making me feel like I was the burden. I meant every word, but the silence still stung. It wasn't that I expected an apology. I wasn't surprised they didn't reach out. I was surprised by how quickly they moved on, how easily they could pretend I didn't exist the moment I stopped being useful. By evening, I gave up checking my phone and turned it off. That night, I fed my daughter mashed carrots, gave her a bath, and watched her fall asleep with her little fingers curled around mine. She looked so peaceful in her crib, so innocent, and I found myself whispering again, more to myself than to her, that she would never grow up thinking love comes with conditions. The next morning, I heard it knocking. Not a single knock, not the friendly kind that comes with a neighbor and a package. This was loud, repeated, persistent, like someone believed the door belonged to them. My daughter was still asleep, the baby monitor glowing softly on the counter. I walked barefoot across the cold floor, cracked the door open, and nearly slammed it shut out of instinct. My entire family was on my front porch. My mom was holding a Tupperware container like a peace offering, her mouth already shaped into the expression she uses when she wants to look reasonable. My dad had his cap pulled low, eyes half closed like he couldn't be bothered. Jenny stood in the back with her arms crossed, flanked by the twins who were tossing snowballs at each other, like this was a casual weekend visit. Her husband sat in their van with the engine running, as if he didn't plan on staying long. I didn't say anything. I just opened the door wider, because I wanted to see what they thought they were doing, and because a small part of me wanted to believe, in spite of everything, that maybe they came for the right reason. They filed in like it was nothing. My mom made a show of taking off her boots on the mat like she was a guest with manners, then walked straight into my kitchen and placed the container on my counter without asking. My dad dropped onto my couch and turned on the TV like he was resuming a show he'd paused. Jenny didn't even look at me. She was already on her phone, thumbs moving fast, as if my living room was just a waiting room for whatever she actually wanted. It took them 5 minutes to get comfortable, and in those 5 minutes I realized something that made my stomach turn. They weren't nervous. They weren't ashamed. They weren't here to repair anything. They were here to reset the balance, to return everything to the way it had always been, as if Christmas never happened. Then came the soft voices, the rehearsed apologies delivered with just enough warmth to sound believable. My mom said, "We were wrong," while she wiped down my counter like she was helping. My dad muttered, "I didn't mean it like that," as he scrolled through his phone. Jenny added, "It wasn't personal. You were just emotional." They kept calling me that, emotional, like that was the flaw, like my feelings were the problem, and not the years of taking, not the way they made me feel like I owed them something for existing. They moved quickly into the part they'd clearly practiced. They wanted to make things right, start fresh. They missed their granddaughter. They wanted to be part of her life. They wanted to spend New Year's together. My mom smiled and said she had already bought new decorations. Jenny said her husband could pick us up. My dad offered to shovel my driveway, like a small task could erase a lifetime of contempt. For a minute I sat there holding my daughter, listening, nodding at the right moments, pretending to consider it. That was the sickest part. They were good at this. They knew exactly how to sound like family. They knew which words to use, which promises to make, how to soften their voices so I would doubt myself. And underneath all of it, I could feel the real reason they were there, the thing they never said out loud, but carried in every sentence. The mortgage payment was due soon. Jenny's son needed help with school tuition again. My mom's car was making a weird noise. Gas prices were up. Groceries, too. They were circling the money like it was a campfire they'd forgotten how to light without me. That night, after they'd eaten my food and used my bathroom and acted like nothing had ever happened, they went to sleep. My dad on the couch, Jenny in my guest room, my mom in the rocking chair with a throw blanket, still clutching her tea like she was the victim. The house was too quiet for how many people were in it. I walked down the hallway and felt my chest tighten with something I couldn't name yet. Around midnight, I found my mom's purse in the bathroom. She'd left it on the sink. Her phone screen was lit up from a recent message. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. The preview was right there, bright and unmistakable, like the universe wanted me to see it. It was from Jenny. "Told you she'd fold. She always does." My hands went numb. I stared at the words until they stopped looking like letters and started looking like a bruise. Fold, like I was paper, like I was predictable, like my boundaries were a performance they could wait out. I walked into the living room and looked at all of them, snoring, curled up, cozy in the home they couldn't even pretend to respect. And for the first time in my life, I felt something colder than the snow outside. They didn't come to apologize. They came because they were losing their ATM, and they thought I'd never catch on. When they left the next morning, it was like they'd never been there at all. My kitchen still smelled faintly like the leftovers my mom brought, but that was it. No note, no thank you. Just an empty guest bed, a half-used roll of toilet paper in the bathroom, and a wine glass in the sink with lipstick I didn't recognize. They were gone before my daughter finished her breakfast. My mom mumbled something about calling soon. Jenny forced a smile and reminded me, casually, that her son's tuition was due again next week, like she was reminding me to grab milk on the way home. My dad didn't even look up from his phone as he stepped into their SUV. I stood in the doorway holding my daughter against my chest and watched them drive off, the taillights disappearing down the street like nothing had happened. I shut the door slowly and leaned my back against it. Something inside me stopped, not cracked, not broke, just stopped. I slid down onto the floor right there in the hallway and sat for 20 minutes without moving. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even sad. I was tired in a way that went deeper than sleep, deeper than exhaustion. It was the kind of tired that comes from carrying a weight for so long you forget it's optional. By noon, I had my bank app open. I hovered over the scheduled payments I'd set up months ago. Mortgage help for my parents. The prepaid balance for Jenny's kids' school. My dad's insurance premium. Everything I'd been quietly covering for the last year and a half. I didn't cancel them yet. I stared at the numbers like they might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. I told myself maybe they really were sorry. Maybe they were just clumsy. Maybe I was being too harsh. That thought lasted until my phone rang. It was Aunt Linda. We weren't close. She was my dad's older sister, widowed, no kids, the kind of woman who sent birthday cards with perfect cursive and left family gatherings early, without explanation. When I answered, her voice was calm but heavy, like she'd been carrying something she didn't want to carry anymore. She asked if I was alone. I told her yes. She asked if she could tell me something she'd heard. I told her she could say whatever she wanted. She didn't ease into it. She told me she'd stopped by my parents' house the day after Christmas to drop off a box of dishes. Nothing serious. When she walked in, they were laughing. Not just laughing, but laughing about me. My mom called me hysterical. My dad said I thought they needed me, but I'd come crawling back. Jenny joked that I was broke emotionally, not financially, and that was the worst kind because I'd crack first. Linda said they talked openly about it, like they were planning a weekend trip. They said they'd give me a few days, then show up, act sorry, bring the kids because that always works, and get me back where they wanted me. My dad said, "We've got her wrapped." Wrapped. That word hit harder than everything else she said. Wrapped like a package, wrapped like a thing, wrapped like I was something they could put back in place when it suited them. Linda paused on the phone, then said she almost didn't call me. She didn't want to get involved, but after hearing how sure they were, how confident they were that I'd fold, she couldn't ignore it. She said she'd always known they leaned on me, but she hadn't realized how deep it ran, how cruel it had become. I thanked her. That was all I could say. When we hung up, I walked straight back to my bank app. I didn't hover this time. I canceled everything. Mortgage assistance gone, school tuition canceled, car insurance revoked, grocery cards turned off, phone plans shut down, emergency transfers ended. Every string they could pull, I cut. Then I blocked every number. My mom, my dad, Jenny, her husband. Within an hour, the calls started from unknown numbers. "Hey, what's going on?" "Pretty sure the bank glitched." "You didn't mean to cancel all that, right?" Then the guilt followed. "How could you do this to your own family? You're punishing the kids. This is unfair. You're overreacting." I didn't respond. By evening, the tone shifted. Jenny sent a long message from a new number reminding me who was there for me when my husband left. My dad sent a single line, "You're on a power trip." Then silence. I stood in my living room holding my baby, watching her reach up for the ceiling fan like it was magic, and I realized something that made me straighten my spine. They hadn't underestimated me. They had forgotten who they were dealing with. The next morning, Jenny left 2 voicemails from another new number. The first started with, "Hey, I think there's a glitch with the bank," and ended with, "Call me ASAP." The second was sharper. By noon, my mom was emailing me from 3 different accounts, all versions of the same message. Confused, concerned, family is forever. Don't let one fight ruin everything. She reminded me, again, that I was emotional. She reminded me that they tried. I didn't reply. I was sitting at my kitchen table drinking tea when another message came in, this one from Jenny's husband. He said he didn't want to get involved, but I should know my mom was losing it, talking about lawyers, saying I stole from the family. That's when it really hit me. They weren't just upset, they were panicking. For the first time in years, they weren't in control. That afternoon, I started getting messages from people I barely knew. "Hope you're okay. We should talk. Your mom's not well. You're hurting everyone with this stunt." I turned my phone off. Instead of spiraling, I logged into every other account I'd ever connected to them. Utilities, medical subscriptions, school emergency contacts, grocery balances. I removed my name from all of it. I even called the school office and told them I was no longer the financial contact for Jenny's twins. They didn't ask why. Then I opened a spreadsheet. 2 years of transactions, gift cards, mortgage top-ups, last-minute rent checks, car repairs, therapy bills, medications, streaming services. It added up to more than I made the year I graduated college. I stared at the total until it stopped feeling abstract. I hadn't been helping them. I'd been funding their lives. Around 3, the doorbell rang. No one was there. Just a box on my welcome mat with my name written in black marker. Inside was a framed photo from Christmas 3 years ago. Me on the floor laughing with one of the twins. Taped to the back was a note. "You were happy once. That's the version of you we miss. Think about that before you ruin what's left." No signature. Just manipulation wrapped in nostalgia. I put the photo face down on the counter and turned on every light in the house. That night, I moved my daughter's crib into my bedroom. I didn't think they'd do anything reckless, but I also didn't trust them not to. While scrolling aimlessly, I saw a vague post from an old family friend about people forgetting who raised them. My mom's name appeared in the comments 3 times. She was spreading her story already. I leaned back on the couch and smiled because she had no idea how much worse it was about to get for them. It started quietly, the way real consequences always do. Not with shouting or dramatic confrontations, but with small systems failing all at once. The first alert came from my email, a generic notification I almost ignored because it looked like spam. Jenny's credit card payment had been declined at a dentist's office. I knew it immediately because the account was still tied to my email from when I'd helped her set it up the previous summer. It was for one of the twins, a routine cleaning I'd been quietly covering for months without saying a word. Less than 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. "Hope you're happy. They had to reschedule. The twins were embarrassed." I stared at that last word for a long time. Embarrassed. Not ashamed of how she'd laughed behind my back. Not embarrassed about the manipulation. Embarrassed because the money stopped. An hour later, my mom emailed me again. This time a single sentence. "We're all very disappointed in you." I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I archived it and moved on because I could feel the shift happening. They weren't angry anymore. They were unraveling. Jenny's school payment was declined next. I found out when the school office called me directly, assuming there had been a mistake since I was still listed as the financial contact. I told them calmly to remove my name from everything. The woman on the phone didn't ask questions. She just said she'd take care of it. That evening, my dad finally reached out. He used a new number, probably a burner, and left a voicemail that almost sounded reasonable if you didn't know him. He said things had gotten out of hand. He said he didn't agree with everything my mom and Jenny had done. He said I was making this too big. Then he said he missed his granddaughter. He asked if I'd call him, just to talk, just to see if we could work something out. I played the message twice. Not once did he say he was sorry. Not once did he mention Christmas. Not once did he ask how I was holding up as a new mother. He just wanted the benefits back in motion. The smear campaign followed right on schedule. A mutual friend messaged me out of nowhere, saying she didn't want to stir anything up, but my mom had been talking. She was telling people I'd become cold, that I was taking things out on the family, that I might be having some kind of breakdown. I read it without surprise. It still stung, but not because it was true. It stung because I knew my mom believed it could be. That's how little she trusted me to know my own mind. I replied with a simple thank you and closed the chat. A few minutes later, another message came in. "Aunt Linda posted something. You should see it." I opened Facebook and felt my chest tighten. Linda hadn't named names. She didn't have to. She wrote about watching someone give and give until there's nothing left, about families mistaking generosity for obligation, about how silence becomes complicity. She wrote that sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is walk away. The comments flooded in almost immediately. People thanking her, people sharing their own stories, and mixed among them were familiar names, people who'd liked my mom's vague posts just days earlier. Now they were quiet, or worse for her, they were liking Linda's words instead. That night, my mom sent one last email from a fourth account. "This doesn't have to go any further," she wrote. "Let's not air dirty laundry. You're not this person. You're better than this." I stood in my living room holding my daughter, reading it over and over, realizing something I hadn't fully accepted until then. They hadn't just been living off my money. They'd built an entire image of me, a version they could manage. Endless giver, endless forgiver, always available. They didn't love me. They loved the role, and now the role was gone. I replied with one sentence. "You used me, and then you laughed about it. We're done." I hit send, blocked the address, and closed my laptop. There was no apology, no explanation, just silence. And somewhere I knew they were scrambling, because without me, the foundation cracked. Bills stacked up. The story they told about me no longer matched the version of me they couldn't reach anymore. The silence lasted 3 days. Not a call, not a message, not even another burner number. They wanted me to feel it, to doubt myself, to think maybe I'd gone too far. But this time it didn't work. I was already past guilt, past fear. I could finally see it clearly. They didn't miss me. They missed the access. On the 4th day, it snowed again. I heard a knock and opened the door slowly, bracing myself out of habit more than fear. It wasn't a delivery. It was Aunt Linda. Her husband stood behind her holding a casserole dish under his coat, and behind him were my cousins, carrying grocery bags and a wrapped box with my daughter's name written in bright letters. I didn't say anything at first. Linda smiled gently and said, "We figured you probably haven't had a break in a while." They came in without expectations, no speeches, no conditions. They played with my daughter on the floor until she laughed herself tired. Linda made tea and asked if I had laundry she could help with. We ate together, nothing fancy, just warm food and quiet conversation. When I finally asked Linda why she came, she didn't dress it up. She said family isn't supposed to be conditional, and she was wrong for staying quiet all these years. Before they left, she told me my mom had called her, furious, accusing her of poisoning me, banning her from the family. Linda told her the truth. The only thing holding that family together had been me, and I had finally stepped away. That night, after they were gone, I sat in the nursery watching my daughter sleep, one tiny hand curled around her blanket. I opened the box they'd left. Inside were handmade toys, a framed photo, and a card in Linda's familiar cursive. "You're not alone. Not anymore." For the first time since Christmas, I slept through the night. No guilt, no second guessing, just peace. The quiet that followed felt different from the other silences. It wasn't heavy or threatening. It didn't feel like a pause before the next blow. It felt settled, like dust finally sinking after a storm that had been raging for years without me realizing how loud it was. I woke up the next morning to sunlight on the nursery wall and my daughter babbling to herself in a soft, sing-song rhythm, completely unaware that something fundamental in our lives had shifted. I lifted her from the crib, breathed in that warm baby smell, and felt a strange sense of certainty. Nothing was chasing me anymore. Days passed without interruption. No new numbers, no emails slipping through filters, no mutual friends, just checking in. My parents and Jenny had gone quiet, not because they understood, but because they had no move left that didn't expose them further. Control only works when the other person still wants something from you. I didn't. And that was the part they never planned for. I went back to routines I hadn't realized I'd abandoned. Morning walks with the stroller, even when it was cold. Cooking real meals instead of grabbing whatever was fastest. I started leaving my phone in another room without anxiety, without that constant low-level dread that someone would need something from me. The house felt lighter. Even my daughter seemed different, calmer, like she could feel the absence of tension the way animals do before humans admit it's there. About a week later, I ran into an old neighbor at the grocery store. She smiled warmly and asked how my parents were doing. The question didn't sting the way it used to. I answered honestly but simply that we weren't in touch right now. She nodded like she understood more than she said and changed the subject. That was the moment I realized the story my family told about me no longer had power outside their circle. People see what they're ready to see, and some of them had been waiting for me to stop pretending. A few days after that, a final email slipped through before I fully locked everything down. It was from my dad. Short, controlled, almost polite. He said he didn't recognize me anymore, that family shouldn't be handled like business accounts, that someday I'd regret this. I read it once, felt nothing rise in my chest, and archived it without responding. He was right about one thing. I didn't recognize myself anymore, and that was the point. That night, I stood in the nursery again, rocking my daughter while the house settled into its nighttime sounds. I thought about the version of me who drove through the snow to Christmas, aching and hopeful, still believing effort could buy safety. I thought about how carefully I'd wrapped those gifts, how much of myself I'd folded into every obligation. I felt a wave of sadness for her, for that version of me, but it wasn't regret, it was compassion. I kissed my daughter's forehead and whispered something different this time. Not a promise fueled by anger or fear, but one rooted in clarity. I told her she would grow up knowing what love looks like when it's not transactional, that she would never have to earn her place in a room, that walking away doesn't mean you failed. Sometimes it means you finally chose yourself. I didn't rebuild bridges. I didn't send updates or olive branches. I let the distance exist. Some relationships don't need closure conversations. They end the moment you stop participating in the lie that holds them together. My family lost access to me, and in losing that, they lost the version of me they'd depended on. What they did with that loss wasn't my responsibility anymore. One afternoon, weeks later, I took the card Aunt Linda left and pinned it inside the closet door where I'd see it every morning. You're not alone, not anymore. It reminded me that family can be chosen, that love can show up quietly without conditions or debt attached. It reminded me that I didn't destroy anything. I stepped out of something that was destroying me. And for the first time in my adult life, the future didn't feel like something I had to manage for everyone else. It felt open. It felt honest. It felt like mine.